you have McGann, the Fangirl. Make sure you subscribe and check back every week for new fandom videos. Hey guys, I thought I'd try a video a little bit differently today. I've got carpal tunnel flare up real bad, can't edit like crazy right now. And I've got my super dramatic eyeshadow because, of course, I'm mourning the death of one of my fandoms. Game of Thrones ended last night. A lot of people have a lot of feelings. There was certainly a lot in that episode to unpack. And I want to talk about the things that that episode did right and then cover the things I thought that episode could have done a good bit better with. I will have my phone out because that's where all my notes are. So even though the finale wasn't really that sad to me, there was a lot to digest, and there are going to be some pretty huge spoilers, so if you haven't watched that episode yet, or you've never seen Game of Thrones at all, this is not a great video to watch right now, okay? Now for me, I had my box of tissues ready. I was prepared to cry that entire episode, but the only scene that really touched me and made me tear up was when Brienne took out the book of all the heads of the Kingsguard and she filled in the rest of the pages for Jamie Lannister. You could see so much love and care in that moment from Brienne and even her memory of Jamie. Like, it's making me tear up now. It's just so sad. I really wanted a better ending for her, but I think it was such a sweet thing to do because if you remember in earlier episodes, I want to say in season 5-ish, Jamie was really concerned about what he would end up leaving behind in that book because that was basically going to be all that was left of him. Because the head of the Kingsguard, they're not supposed to have wives and children. Their whole focus and priority is supposed to be the king. So to see Brienne do that and kind of finish out Jamie's story in a good way, that, oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry! It's so hard to lose a fandom! But with Brienne's ending, we saw unrequited love at its absolute finest, but it really hurt my heart for her less than perfect ending. Then Sansa becoming the Queen of the North was another perfect moment in my opinion. I loved Lyanna Mormont and I had really hoped that she would somehow make her way to the Iron Throne, but instead she just went out like a champ taking out a giant. Mad respect for her. And really, I'm not just saying this in hindsight because the show's over, but from episode 1, I was like, Team Sansa. She's my girl. Arya's great, but Team Sansa. And people always made fun of me for that. Like, oh, you know, like she's just this little do-nothing twit, or she just follows orders, or she's this or she's that. But I could see, even as a little girl, she was watching everybody and she was learning from it. And even if you look at the darkest parts of her story arc, like being a captive of the Lannisters or being married to Ramsay Bolton, who just did horrible things to her, she never let that defeat her. And I find that so respectable because she always said, no, this was a lesson. I'm going to treat it as a lesson and I'm going to be a victor, not a victim. And she did. She really did. She learned from everything. She took it all in and she let that shape who she became and how she proceeded moving forward. She didn't keep making the same dumb mistakes over and over and over again. She really, truly figured things out and learned how to play the Game of Thrones better than anybody else in the series. And all of those lessons led Sansa to become a true queen. Another great point in the finale was Jon going off at the end with the wildlings, which I think was confusing to a lot of people. Even I was turning to my husband going, what is going on? Where's Jon leading all the wildlings? I felt like we lost some clarity in those final moments there with Jon, but after talking it out, it seems very clear now that Jon decided, oh, screw my oath to the Night's Watch yet again, because for some reason he decided he wasn't part of the Night's Watch anymore, even though he was the Lord Commander and just up and left like 3 years ago. He's like, what? They still exist? Yeah, buddy, how would you know whether or not they exist? You totally bailed on them, even though you had this lifelong oath. So I didn't hate that Jon got re-sent back up to the wall, but I was kind of confused why they just let him keep going. Say, okay, go with Tormund and everybody else and just leave. But what I really do like about that ending is how it ties into Ghost. If you can remember back to season 1, episode 1, the Starks were out in the woods. They found these dire wolf pups. There were 5 of them, so 1 for each Stark child. Then they found this white runty one in the back, and oh, well, Jon Snow can have that one. Essentially, Wolf was a gift from Ned Stark, and a lot of people got really upset in season 8 after the big battle with the Night King where Jon did not pet or give any kind word to Ghost, and I agree, that was like, hey, what did Ghost do? But if you think about it on a symbolic level, Ghost was a gift from Ned Stark, and Ned Stark had lied to Jon his entire life, and Jon chooses not to interact with Ghost shortly after learning that, hey, I'm actually a Targaryen prince that is the rightful heir to the throne. So not interacting with Ghost after the Battle of Winterfell is just really the show saying that Jon is embracing his dragonhood and letting go of his wolfhood of being a Stark. Because if somehow you don't know, Targaryens, which Jon actually was, are dragons by their sigil, and the Starks are wolves. So to me, that part of that episode was very clear cut that Jon was saying, I'm not a wolf anymore, I'm a Targaryen, this is my path, this is where I'm going. So please, Tormund, take Ghost for me, release him north of the wall so that he can be free, because that's where a dire wolf belongs. Now circle back to episode 6 of season 8, where Jon Snow gets up to the wall, where he's basically gonna be kind of a captive the rest of his life. I mean, taking the black in the series is about the equivalent of a judge saying you can join the army or you can go to jail, you pick. But for Jon to continue with Tormund and the other free folk and decide I'm gonna be one of them now, it's Jon re-embracing his wolfhood and letting go of the thought of ever being a dragon again. And that's why Jon actually pets Ghost at the end of episode 6, because that's him saying, no, I'm not gonna do this Targaryen BS anymore, I'm 100% Stark. So think about it, Jon said a dire wolf belongs north of the wall where he can be free, and that's exactly what Jon does too. So he is the wolf again. Another beautifully executed moment was when Daenerys dies and Drogon like senses it, and he comes up the wall of the palace to the throne room, and he's like looking around at Jon Snow and trying to get Daenerys up, and he's like, what the heck? And then in his grief, he melts down the Iron Throne because he's not blaming Jon. I don't know if Drogon processed that Jon killed Daenerys or what he really thought happened, but he saw that throne. He said, this is what my mother's always going on about. This is what she's worked her entire life for. This is what she died for. And he burnt that down to the ground for her. And then to have Drogon pick up Dany and just fly off into the nothing was so just breathtaking. Like the Targaryen house, Drogon is now alone in the world. And it's interesting because like they said in season, I think 2, in the House of the Undying in Karth, magic started amping up when the dragons came back into the world, and the dragons were the strongest in Daenerys' presence. So with Daenerys dead, I don't know what that means for Drogon, but it can't be anything great. There's gonna be a lot of magical fallout from that, and I think that might be why Bran wanted to track down where Drogon went, because now Bran is this magical three-eyed raven, so he kind of needs the magic to be as strong as it can be for his own purposes and benefit. Speaking of which, Bran becoming Bran the Broken, King of Westeros, I mean, that really threw me for a loop there. I'm not surprised in film a lot. I mean, usually I can see things coming, and I saw about a dozen different scenarios that would have worked for the end of Game of Thrones. Bran becoming king was not one of them. But we really have to ask ourselves, is it good storytelling to spend 8 seasons taking us in one direction and then just turn at a 90-degree angle and bring in a non-contender out of pretty much nowhere? And here's where I'm gonna start complaining about the episode, because Bran flat out refused to be the Lord of Winterfell, saying, I'm the three-eyed raven now, that has all these new responsibilities and blah blah blah. So he renounced his name, he renounced his title. Why on earth would he accept being king of Westeros? He doesn't even seem interested in the position after he takes it. He just wants to set up all these individuals to run everything for him while he goes warging a dragon. And to the credit of the series, I remember maybe in season 2 or 3 where Bran was running Winterfell and he was interacting with the people and trying to solve their problems, and I thought, hey, he's really good at that for a kid. But that was way before he became the three-eyed raven, and his personality just totally went nothing. He has nothing left. Also, maybe I'm kind of confused here, but the last three-eyed raven said he was like 1,000 years old. How does that translate to Bran being king? Because he's supposed to serve until the end of his days, and for some reason he can't have any children, which I don't remember ever being discussed either. I mean, has he tried? Has he ever really had a girlfriend? I don't think so. But did anyone realize before they voted for Bran that he might live to be 1,000 or older? Because Bran didn't seem to be volunteering sharing that information to anyone. Also, I get why the North wanted to be free, but I'm really confused that when Bran was going to become king of Westeros, Sansa was still like, we want to be out though. We don't want to be any part of your kingdom. I was under the impression that Sansa and the rest of the North's problem was that they didn't like who was in charge of Westeros, not that they didn't want to totally be part of that kingdom or wanted to be their own separate thing. Now, maybe Sansa's just thinking long term and she's like, well, hey, if Bran never has children, we don't want to be subjected to whoever is king next. But again, Bran might live to be 1,000, and assuming Sansa has had some kind of conversation like that with her brother, is the end issue that Sansa just really wanted to be a queen? And I'm totally down with that if that's what she wanted. I just kind of need some clarity on what her thought process was to reject her brother's rule. And maybe the most disturbing issue is that Bran makes us very aware that he can see into the future. He's done it over multiple episodes now. He told Theon, hey, you're a good man, Theon, because he knew he was about to die. He told Tyrion, well, yes, I'll be the king. Why do you think I came all the way down here? So if he can see all of that, then it's really freaky and disturbing because he did certain things and actions to make sure that other people would die or get out of the way so that he could ultimately take the throne. Is that for the best? I don't know, but it's certainly disturbing to think that Bran manipulated and controlled situations to take the Iron Throne for himself. And furthermore on that topic, I didn't hear one single person in that gallery mention that Jon was actually Aegon Targaryen. Like, nobody. And I understand Jon's a prisoner in the moment that they're discussing it, so he's not really in an advantageous position, and maybe they saw, hey, you killed the queen, so you can't be the new king. Maybe that's a rule, I don't know. Or maybe they thought, well, Jon's kind of too weak to be king, or he just doesn't want it, and so they made other decisions accordingly. I'm okay with that. I would just have liked to have seen that discussed to some degree, because even if you say, well, Jon doesn't want to be king, that doesn't matter because Bran said he didn't want to be king either, and look how that turned out. And to the same effect, yes, we see Daenerys have these moments where she's very cold-blooded in the whole series, but it's always been with this sense that she's right or she's doing the right thing for the masses. She's always been out to protect the little guy, not the lords, not the masters. I really thought the series was going to end with Daenerys going after Sansa in the north, and that's when they all have to come together and kill her and take over that way. That's not what happened though. It was really strange. And I understand Daenerys was losing people close to her left and right. She was going through grief, she hadn't slept, she hadn't eaten. Those are all factors that caused her to massacre all the people of Winterfell. But even so, it was very off-brand for her to go from I'm the breaker of chains to I am the burner of children. The only action that would have made sense was for Daenerys to go straight to the Red Keep, rip that castle down, or have Drogon rip Cersei out of the window she was standing at for way too long, because seriously, I mean, what was with that last episode? Cersei has done nothing but try to preserve herself and her children the entire series, but she stands there watching a dragon tear down the city for a good 20 minutes before she decides to leave. Ugh. And then Arya also abandons her quest to kill Cersei's at the last second after one conversation with the Hound that had probably happened many times before they got to King's Landing, and that was so clearly happening just so that Arya could be out in the chaos and we could be more about the entire event. It was just not great writing on any of these women's story arcs at the end. And as far as Dany's story arc of going crazy, it would have made a lot more sense with how it had been leading up to that point if she had taken Winterfell and then snapped fully when Sansa still refused to bend the knee. Because again, that gave people a reason to react because they don't want to see Sansa harmed. And for all the buildup the series did with magic, I felt so sad at the end of the last episode. We had no final involvement with the gods who had played such a vital role in the series in the background the entire time. And especially the fact that we get no final anything from the Lord of Light, who I think is also the many-faced god that Arya served under. And really, what was his purpose for saving Arya and bringing Jon back from the dead? Daenerys was fireproof, so she seems like someone the Lord of Light would want on the throne, or maybe he doesn't want her because she's just fireproof so he can't control her? I don't know, flip a coin because it could really go either way. But you're telling me that Arya's final purpose was to kill the Night King and Jon Snow's only purpose was to kill Daenerys? It felt like the show had built up that Arya was meant to kill Daenerys, and doing so in a Grey Worm suit would have been phenomenal, but apparently Arya forgot she is a ninja woman, doesn't use that power at all in season 8, but Arya kills Daenerys, closing those green eyes that she was promised to be closed by Melisandre, so that Jon could step in and become the king. I mean, that made sense for the level of involvement a god would need to have. But instead, Arya closes the brown eyes, which are Walter Frey, and the blue eyes, which are the Night King and his army, but she never gets the green eyes, which could have been Cersei or Daenerys. What the heck? Finally, I want to complain about the many unfulfilled moments this season. There's too many to list them all, but did Tormund know that Brienne was available again? He seemed like he genuinely liked her for her, and he enthusiastically supported everything she did. Like, I really like them together as a couple. I like Brienne and Jamie together more as a couple, but now that he's out of the picture, I mean, come on, buddy, you could step in a little bit. Did anybody let you know that this was possibly an option? I mean, sure, Tormund was kind of creepy and he didn't know how to flirt, but Brienne was kind of awkward too, and even though she's part of the Kingsguard now, I mean, yeah, she's not supposed to have a husband or children, but really, come on. New world, new rules. Let's not be sticklers for the old ways. I would have just really liked to have seen Tormund have the chance to express his feelings to Brienne and her to be able to process and accept or reject them accordingly. Just something authentic there where it got closed one way or the other. I would have also liked to have seen some kind of scene where Sansa tells Brienne to stay with Bran, because what we end up seeing is that Brienne ditches Sansa, which doesn't make any sense because she's been so sworn and dutiful to Sansa to stay with Bran, who is the king, and so now she's part of the Kingsguard, or the head of the Kingsguard. But Sansa also became a queen, so she's gonna need a Queensguard, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I need to see that moment between them of Sansa saying, it's okay, I want you to stay with Bran, he's more vulnerable. I don't doubt that that's what happened, but you know, if we don't see it, really it doesn't exist. I'm also a little bit bothered that Sansa didn't end up with anybody, and she just felt so alone and isolated on her final moments on screen. Did the rules to elect a king or queen apply to the North too? Because if not, Sansa's getting pretty old by that era's standards, so she needs to start popping out some heirs pretty quickly. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing Sansa become the queen, but it just still, like I said, felt so lonely and isolating for her. And yeah, between Theon being dead and Tyrion staying in the south, there wasn't really anyone presented that she could have paired off with by the end. But just seeing her sitting there alone in that throne and not even having like a lot of people around her, it just made me not feel very hopeful for Sansa's future. Like, she's gonna be very brooding about the things that happened to her before, and she's not gonna trust anybody else enough to ever move on from what Ramsay and other men have done to her. And that's a little bit sad to me. I would have liked to have seen somebody around Sansa who seemed to genuinely care about her by the end. And that's where it really disappointed me that Sansa and Tyrion didn't even have final words at the last episode. I get Tyrion is a good bit older than Sansa and they were married out of requirement, like neither one of them really wanted to marry the other, but all through season 8 they had this really good rapport and they seemed like they were becoming really good friends, and even hinting like, oh well, it could never work between us, ha ha ha, well why not? You know, it seemed like we were taking that shift that they might get back together on their own terms, like they want to be together, and it just didn't happen. And it bugged me to no end that they didn't even get some final words together like you're always welcome in the North, or we look forward to working with your kingdom in the future. Nothing. It was, I don't know, it just seems so strange for a series that has been all talk for the majority of the episodes to not let people talk in the last episode, and so many parts drug on forever instead of just letting the characters interact with each other properly and finish out story arcs in meaningful ways. So much felt unfinished by the finale, and I think that's why so many fans are disappointed. And yeah, I get it's HBO's series and David and DB, I think that's the right names, they're gonna do whatever whatever they want as the showrunners and we're just at their mercy. But let's be serious. HBO has done a lot of really riveting shows that they canceled after a season or two because the money just wasn't there. The fans just weren't that into it. Rome being a great example. Rome was a fantastic show, but it just sort of jumped way over that shark in season 2 and everybody abandoned it. The show got canceled. But people have poured billions of dollars into Funko figures and clothing and movie sets of Game of Thrones. Like, the fans have shown the series so much support, it's ridiculous. They've made so much money off of it. So at the same time, even though it's HBO's show, we as the fans who supported it and kept it alive for 8 seasons, I mean, this show basically defines the 2010s. We deserved better than a True Blood ending where we have all this buildup, we have all this hope, we have all these desires, and they all just go right down the toilet in the last moments of the series. And I could forgive a lot of the actions that happened in the last season, but what I do find completely unforgivable is the lack of interaction between certain characters that we needed for closure because we cared about those relationships. And we only cared about those relationships because you people made us care about those relationships. So to say, well, it's our show and the fans aren't going to be happy is such a disgusting disregard for all the time and money we've given you. And no, you're never gonna make everybody happy. That's impossible, but you could try with maybe some people. Not just throw a story in out of nowhere, spend a lot of time dragging things out when so many people don't get their final say-sos and goodbyes, and leave so many things unfinished, and then act like we're entitled whiny brats when we're not happy about these things that we've invested so much of ourselves and our time and our money into. No series should end in a way that makes you wish you never watched it in the first place. And that's my final say-so on that. I might be overthinking it, but yeah, that's literally my job. Well, that's all I have for now, but this video's not quite over yet. I get a lot of comments that say, do a theory on this topic, but I've already done those theories. So please consider going to my main channel page and clicking on the video tab so that way you can see everything I've done. You will probably find a lot of things you like that you never even knew that I posted. I want to let you know that I also have 2 other channels, Say Halo Goodbye Gaming and the Fanily Family Vlogs. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed enough to hit subscribe and share. I can use all the help I can get to let other people know that this channel exists. And if you made it this far, leave me a comment that says something like, hey, I made it to the end, and then let me know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. I can't make any promises, but the more people that request something, the more I can look into it. Okay, well, I love you. I'll see you in the next video.